seconds. Thanks. Oh, I know. Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone to our official last CAC meeting of the school year. Yay, but we will be back. We will be back in September, and we are a phone call or email away if you need us. So to start off tonight, we just wanted to, let me see if my clicker works. Oh, or maybe not. Oh, on. There we go. We just wanted to start with a moment of gratitude. So I wanted to just uplift this Alice Wong quote for everyone. Alice Wong is a famous disability rights advocate, amazing author. If you have not checked out her work, please do so. But in this quote, she writes, "There is so much that able-bodied people could learn from the wisdom that often comes in disability, but space needs to be made, hands need to reach out, and people need to be lifted up." And so I wanted to share this quote with our community and just take a couple of seconds to really thank my CAC board, Diana, Judy, Robin, Jen, and Danny. I cannot thank you enough for your tireless effort in our CAC board. You are parent volunteers and you do so much. And I am just really grateful to have you and for all the work that you put in. And just remember, we have one more year, so you cannot quit. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank my CAC chair, Robin, for her tireless advocacy. She is so fierce and amazing at uplifting our kids and also at calling out the hard things that need to be called out. So I just want to take this moment to give Robin her flowers. Thank you, Robin. And Dr. Sosa is bringing her flowers over.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I don't have allergies. They're beautiful. I'm going to have you take them away, though, because I have on my table, please. Thank you so much. Pictures. Okay. Danny, you have one job. Here you go. You can hold. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so we're going to be ruthless with our schedule because we have such a good show for you today. Get ready. You're going to want to watch this on YouTube again when you get home. But just before, piggybacking on is piggybacking a wrong term? I don't know if that's offensive anymore. But it takes a lot of work and planning to put on these meetings, and we can't do this work without our amazing interpreters. So we're gonna just do a shout out. I don't know if we're allowed to, but we got a little candy because you guys are so sweet and always good for us. So we've got Milve is somewhere. Milve, well, right there. Oh, she's live interpreting. Dang. And Rebecca, and then we've got Austin and Peck. We also have Lena, who shows up every time for our deaf and ASL community, and if anybody needs it, she can interpret for you right now too. Next year, you're going to be on our YouTube. And also Ms. Lily, who's in the childcare room. She is the woman you all dropped your kids off with, if you were wondering. She's wonderful. Okay, so we tried to do this a little bit better, but I guess we're not going to do that. Okay. All right, great. So one more thing. It's the end of the year. Give us a break here. So we're going to do the CAC Ally Award. It's not on the schedule because this is the last meeting of the year, which was an excellent idea to have the last meeting of the year be in May. The CAC Ally Award was created by a previous CAC executive board. The goal was to highlight the folks who are doing the good work in the district. The relationship between district folk and CAC families is complicated and delicate, and like any codependent relationship, we need you just as much as you need us. And so this year's recipient of the CAC Ally Award is actually Dr. Jill Baker. Oh, we got her. She didn't know. And so we're so glad, I don't want to hold it because my hands are dirty. We are so glad to get on Dr. Baker's farewell tour schedule. Please get in camera. You got to come closer. Yes. No, because the cameras. Sorry, we're in show business now. No, look at my speech. Okay, so we're so glad to get on Dr. Baker's farewell tour schedule. I do believe that Dr. Baker has attended more CAC meetings in her role as superintendent than any other superintendent in the history of CACs. And do you know why? Because Dr. Baker shows up. Dr. Baker is a person who shows up. Her first year as superintendent was during the pandemic. And we learned very quickly that it really matters who the superintendent is. It also matters who your board members are, so don't forget to vote June 2nd. And the pandemic was really terrible, and we're all gonna make really weird art about it one day when we've processed it. Dr. Baker had one of the hardest jobs during one of the scariest times. And she was the epitome of calm and collected, and she made tough but good decisions. Dr. Baker has shown up for this community by always speaking the language of equity and inclusion, and she has made elevating the student voice the Long Beach way. She has the quiet confidence of Clint Eastwood, and she swims like a fish in appreciation of her visionary leadership and steadfast advocacy for students with disabilities. It is with so much gratitude that we present this year's CAC Ally Award to Dr. Jill Baker. Yes.
Stand in it with you. Thank you.
Okay, now you can say thank you.
I'm going to stand on my tippy toes. Thank you to all of you who show up, and to the Long Beach Unified team in the room that comes every month. I can't come every month, but who comes every month. Dr. Claudia Sosa Valderrama and team. Those of you who I look out and see just do beautiful work in bridging the many gaps that we have as a district in and out of the community, and to help us to be better. Thank you to parents who show up and advocate for your children. It is truly an honor to be an ally, considered an ally to this community. So thank you, and you got me, and you're in trouble. I wasn't here to get an award. I'm here for state of education.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I do want to say, Mr. Poe, that was not written by AI. Okay, so I just want you to know I wrote that myself. And now, Myrna, here we go. This is the show. We're gonna sweep this up at the break. Don't forget to eat your butt.
Okay, so now for the main show, which is our State of Special Education and our deep dive into all things special education data related. I want first, before we dive in, to talk a little bit about Legislative Day, and I think Jen is in the room. So I'm gonna invite her up to share. Legislative Day is Legislative Day is a yearly event that we take part in as the SELPA, and it's basically the time that we go and we advocate with our state legislators, our senators, our lawmakers, to ensure that they keep the interests of our students with disability at the forefront. And so I have linked in this presentation, and you'll be able to go through it at home at your own time, the bills that the state SELPA and our district supported in championing our students with disabilities they are things like including funding for accessible playgrounds, funding IDEA and access for all students. But it's just a really amazing day where parents get to join their district administration in advocacy. And I don't know if, Jen, you want to say a couple things about it, but here's Jen.
Hello. My name is Jennifer, and I am the CAC secretary, and I'm also a parent of 3 Long Beach Unified School District kiddos, and one has an IEP. A few weeks ago on May 6th, I attended this annual SELPA Legislative Sharing Day in Sacramento, and I went as a parent representative for our district, and we were super lucky because we also got to partner up with 2 other SELPAs, which is our really big group up there, that are local to us here in Long Beach. And we started the morning listening to lots of speakers and information sharing in regards to what we were actually doing there, because I wasn't exactly sure yet. And then we all traveled to the offices of all of our legislators across the street from the Capitol. And we ended up meeting with some of our representatives. We had 4 appointments scheduled with our assembly members, and then a 5th one with Senator Gonzalez. So for the morning, it was like pretty busy and really good energy with all kinds of people from all over the state of California, and they were all there representing their SELPAs. All of us there were for the same purpose of speaking with our elected officials and advocating for their support of the specific assembly bills that Maruna was talking about. All of them were going to have a direct impact across the state of California for our kids. And I went into this event really having no idea what it was going to be like, and I left feeling completely overwhelmed. There was so much information that I was taking in. It was like being in the real life version of Schoolhouse Rock and a crash course in civics. And myself and the other parents, we did what all parents do with kids in special education, is we shared stories, we advocated hard, and we did our best to explain the importance and urgency of our elected officials supporting what we were there to talk about. I left feeling incredibly inspired and also really grateful for how lucky my own student has been, being supported in this district by some amazing teachers and principals. I was also very aware of how much support is needed to continue to improve. I've never felt more strongly than I did after leaving that event how important it is to vote. And I encourage each and every one of you to thoughtfully explore all of the options in our upcoming primary elections as well as in November, because local elections are just as important as the ones at state and federal levels. And it is absolutely imperative that we elect officials that do not just support special education, but also strive to be inclusive and embrace the differences that make all of our students and families amazing. I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to have gone to this event, and I look forward to seeing how all of our assembly bills do that we advocated for when they get to the Senate floor. So, crossing our fingers that they do well. Thank you.
So we've got a lot of information that we're going to do in the next slide for the presentation. If you have any questions, we're doing the index card thing again. It really does work. So we have them on tables. If you need them, we're going to pass them out. All your questions, write it down. If you don't want to write it down, whisper it to Diana, and she's going to write it down. But if we don't, we can't break the flow of the presentation. So write your questions down. We'll get to them at the end.
I'm going to see if I can move around the room so I'm not standing here. Originally, I was going to stand here, and then I'm like, no, I need to move. So I just wanted to take some time to introduce our presenters tonight. So we have Dr. Sosa Valderrama, who will be speaking to us about our board goals. Myself, and I will be talking about the SELPA data and how that impacts our community. Then we have Dr. Prelo, who's going to talk a little bit about programs and how data informs programs. We have Ms. Jennifer Rodarty, who's going to talk about our attendance initiatives as well as the Tier 1 supports that we offer for our students with IEPs. IEPs. And then we have Dr. Owens here, who is going to talk about our compliance measures and just some information for parents around parent survey data. And then Miss Melissa Stark is unable to be with us, but she is our OCIPD lead, guru of all things curriculum. And she was going to talk to us about board goals and is available to talk to parents about instruction and data related to instruction as needed. So I want us to just take a moment to center ourselves around this quote. How many people in the room are familiar with Ed Roberts? You're not familiar with Ed Roberts? Robin, do you want to tell the room who Ed Roberts is? No? Okay, you're eating. So Ed Roberts is one of the founding activists who really, really championed independent living for folks with disabilities. He was instrumental at establishing the first center of independent living for significantly disabled people. And his activism and work is the reason why we have independent living for our folks who are considered significantly disabled. His life and work is amazing. I highly recommend checking him out. But one of the things that is super powerful about Ed Roberts and his activism is that he really champions the idea that disability is a strength. It's society and the context in which accessibility is viewed that hinders folks with disabilities. And so that's a big paradigm shift. And I invite everyone in the room, if this is the first time that you're hearing that, to really explore Ed Roberts' work. Find me after. I'm more than happy to have a conversation about Ed Roberts and Judy Heumann and all the amazing activists that are responsible for the civil rights of folks with disabilities. I wanted to also really center us tonight in thinking about data from a perspective of advocacy, because for many of us in the room, data has been and can be extremely harmful. And what I mean by that is I don't think that there's anyone in this room who has been in special education or familiar with special education who hasn't had an experience of data being used in a way that is deficit-based. And so what I mean by that is that oftentimes when we look at data for our students and when we look at data for folks with disabilities, it's always measured against a typical norm. And that oftentimes leads our students and folks with disabilities to be viewed from a deficit perspective. So tonight, I really invite us to think about the conversation from an advocacy perspective, because for our community and for all minoritized communities, data should serve as a point of advocacy and as a point of empowerment. And that is really, really, really the work that I invite us to do around data, is to use data to affirm our students, to use data in ways that create powerful change in advocating for our students' self-determination, not advocating for their ways of typicality or ways of assimilation, which oftentimes have been oppressive. So that I want to be the center of our grounding for this evening. So really quickly, my role as the SELPA director is basically all fun things compliance related when it comes to IEPs in our district. And so that's actually a really, really important thing, even though it doesn't sound very fun, because we fought long and hard to have access to these educational spaces. I want to remind folks that the IDEA legislation was passed in 1975. Before 1975, our students did not have the right to attend their public schools. That's a huge thing. That's huge. And so if we don't constantly think and center that and center our civil rights and our right to access, we could potentially lose it. And so it is so, so crucial to really think about the data around IEP compliance, least restrictive environment, and access as a civil rights initiative and as a civil rights grounding. And so every year, our district and districts all over the state of California receive a letter. It's called the Annual Determination Letter. And in that letter, the state gives us metrics that talks about how we're doing in providing access for our students with disabilities. And there's various different measures on this letter, but tonight I'm going to talk about some of the ones that are really, really important in our students' lives and also in their access to education. So the first indicator that the annual determination letter looks at is our students' access to least restrictive environments. So what that means is, how are we doing in providing our students with IEPs access to general education environment, general education school settings, and general education programs? And each year, the state has a moving target on LRE access. So you'll see in 2020, the state had the target of 58%. We were at 61.47%. And then each year we have grown in our LRE access for our students. This year, the target for the state was 67%, and we came in at 64.86%. So we didn't meet the target by 2%. So that informs our conversation as we move forward for next year. How do we continue to grow? And again, this is a moving target for the state. So this number always grows as least restrictive environment data comes in. And so our goal is really to maximize least restrictive environment for every student and ensure that we're providing that access. So why is this important to families, and why is this important to folks in the room? This is really important because this data is what guides your students' instructional program and their access to core curriculum in their schools. So we're going to talk a little bit about this later in the board goals, but when you think about access to, say, a graduation requirement course like algebra, right, for high school diploma, that is a general education course. And so if I'm wanting my student to participate and have that experience and achieve that high school diploma, I need to make sure to ask that the math course is delivered in the least restrictive environment, which is a gen ed algebra course. So that is why LRE data and LRE access is especially important. Where can you find this in your student's IEP? So as we were doing this presentation, I realized that it might be really helpful in the upcoming year to do an IEP lab where we pull IEPs and look at like where exactly certain information is, because these documents are very long, they're confusing. But for tonight, I wanted to highlight where LRE data is found for students. So in your student's IEP, it is actually on that first page, and you'll see general education percentile range, 40% to 79%. So that'll tell you the range of which your child is in their LRE. Of course, the really, really, really important part about LRE is your student's FAPE offer. That's your free and appropriate public education offer. And that's the page in the IEP that delineates what program your student's in. So that's your RSP program, your SDC classes, the minutes of service. So that page is what breaks down this number. And if that sounds confusing in any way, find me at the break. I would love to go over it with you. So I know it's a lot and can be really confusing. So the next really important indicator, so we looked at our least restrictive access for students. We know that we want students to be in their LRE for 80% or more of the school day. That's our ultimate goal. The next indicator is looking at how many students are in their least restrictive environment 40% of the day or less. And so for that, the target is being at less than 13.5%. And for our district this year, we were at 22%. So we're actually a lot higher than the target for the state. So that means that there are students in self-contained classes and settings that are not in their least restrictive environment. And as you can see, we've decreased that number since 2020, so we're making progress on our indicator, but we're still higher than where we want to be with access. And so these students are students who maybe are in a specialized healthcare class, or they're in programs that are, for the majority of the day, not considered a general education classroom. And lastly, the last indicator that is important is our students who are completely in separate settings. So what this means is that our students who come to our district who need a setting that is not a public school setting here in our district. So what that means is that it could be a non-public school setting, it could be a residential setting. The state looks at how many offers of this placement we make for students, and the target for this year was 2.6%, and we were close, we were at 3.24%. And with this measure as well, we have made progress in decreasing it over the years. So this is what measures our indicator for students who are in non-public school settings. And there's also a website, it's called the Caltan website, where all of these indicators are available, and you can look at our district and compare it to other school districts. So if you're interested and you're a data nerd like I am more than happy to go into the website with you and show you where you can find the indicators and where you can see different neighboring districts and their data as well. Okay, and now I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Owens.
Thank you very much. So one of the things we've been looking at is parent participation rates in IEPs. And where that is in your IEP, well, first you can see our data. Historically, we meet our parent participation rate. There's a direct question in the IEP which talks about, were you a member of the IEP team meeting? Did you feel like your voice was heard? And that is, but we're at 97%, our target's 97%, we're at 99.5. We've been historically over 99%. This is where your question is. So on the consent page where you sign, I consent to this IEP, there's one question, so that's what the state is looking at, and is, did the school district facilitate parental guidance involvement as a means of improving services for your child? So it's one question. We look at that and we say, hey, great, we're meeting a state indicator, but does it really give us all of the information that we need to be able to service our students and families who are having IEP meetings, right? So what we are doing, and I have put on your tabletops, if you wanted to scan, we have it in English, Spanish, and Khmer. So at every IEP meeting, your team should be giving you a piece of paper that says parent survey. That takes you directly to a Google survey, right? That Google survey we monitor, and it helps guide our practice in making sure that we are meeting your needs. So like I say, these are the questions, but if you, during the break, want to actually just go in and do the survey, you don't have to be in an IEP right now, it'll allow you to walk through it, see the types of questions. We actually as a team looked through these the other day and said, this is great, but we're missing some key indicators of things that we as a district find valuable, like student voice, right? What do parents really find important as part of this process? So we as a team in-house are going to be working with your CAC leadership to revise this so that at the start of next year, your survey is going to be updated. One of the ways you'll know for sure that you're getting this is because it's also going to have all of our CAC meetings for next year. And as the topics are updated, it'll be updated so you'll know what CAC meetings, because we really want to grow this group, right? So you'll have the sheet with that you don't have to sit and do right there. Just like this, if you got this at your IEP meeting yesterday, you could be bringing it, you could scan it, do your Google survey right now. And like I say, this is what's going to give us valuable information to make sure we're meeting your needs. So if you have strong opinions after reviewing what's on this, if you have strong opinions about, you know, I think the district should be interested in this. I think that you share it with your CAC leadership team, because we're going to be meeting with them and we're going to be redesigning this. And we'd really like to have it at the start of next school year, so that every IEP you're getting this survey, we're getting our parent voice. We really need it to build. This is being handed out, but honestly, a lot of people aren't completing it, right? We're not getting a whole lot of input, so we really want to push that. We want your voice. We want to make sure we're meeting your needs. Child, fine, we're back to Maruna.
So the last indicator that I wanted to go over with the CAC community with is our child indicator data. So our child find data is important because it is the data, the number that shows if we're meeting our requirement of offering services to students. So every SELPA and every school district has the obligation to let community know where they can have their student assessed and where they can access services. So for us, the state requires that we do so at a minimum of 8.43%, and we were at 13.49. So what this means is that myself and our SELPA team needs to go out and provide opportunities for parents to request assessments, to request services. But it's not just at the public school, it's all over our city. So what that means is that we go out to preschool centers, to daycares, we go out to private schools, to students that are placed in homeschool settings, and we ask parents if they are interested in obtaining assessments or they suspect that their student may have a disability and would like to obtain services. And I wanted to highlight this because in case there are folks in the room that are wondering, who do I go to if I have a question about getting my student assessed, or I have a neighbor or a friend that suspects that their student may have a disability or needs services or even needs a connection to, say, Harbor Regional, you would come to myself, Susie, any of our special ed administrators, Dr. Owens, and we can help you get those services. So I really wanted to highlight this last indicator for us. And then now we are on our break. Oh yes, we're doing great. All right, we have a 10-minute break.
All right, so how many of you have heard about our board goals? Raise your hands. Okay, so some of you. So board goals are some goals that our Board of Education have decided are where they want to focus on, like looking at data. And they want to get updates on that. And the way they come to the conclusion that they want to focus on these things is by looking at data. So staff take them through a variety of data, and based on what they see, they decide that these are the things or the areas that we want to focus our monitoring on. So the board goals are not every single thing that happens at schools. It is some targeted areas that the board is monitoring. So today we're going to go over some of those goals as they relate to students that have disabilities. And we have 4 board goals. So we'll go through those. And there's also guardrails, which we're not going to go into in detail. But basically, these are kind of like safeguards that give instruction to the superintendent of the things that they're written in a negative kind of way. You know, they have to take those things into consideration when making decisions. But let's go into the board goals. So, oh, no, wrong way. Okay. So the first board goal is around literacy, and I'll read this to you. It is the percentage of grade 3 students who meet or exceed grade level standards on the State English Language Arts SBAC assessment, and it will grow from 48% in June 2023, which is when the goals were established, to 70% by June 2028. So not quite yet, but by the end of 2028, we want to have met this goal. And this goal, as you see, is for all 3rd grade students at the end of 3rd grade. So that's where we want students to be. So relative to where our students that have IEPs are, is they are at 28%. So 28% of students with IEPs have met or exceeded quarter 4 fluency assessments in 2025-2026. So by the end of the 4th quarter, 28% of students with IEPs have met this. Now keep in mind that these are all students that have IEPs in all programs. So they are in RSP, they can be in a co-taught class, they could be receiving special day services in an MM class or in an MS class. So it's all of our students. And also keep in mind that the specific progress that our students are making is not just measured through this goal, because this is a generic goal for everybody, but it's really to be looked at on the students' IEP goals. So students that have IEPs have very specific individualized goals, and so those the progress that the students are making towards their independent individual goals, at least annually, you'll be discussing those when they have their IEP meeting. Yes, board goal 2. So board goal 2 is related to board goal 1. Because, so I'll read it again, the percentage of students in grades 4 through 8 scoring at the not met achievement level in the prior year who met the scale score growth target on the SBAC English Language Arts Assessment. And we want them to increase from 28% in June 2023 to 60% June 2028. So these are the students that are in the not met category. So the students that did not meet, and now these are students that are past 3rd grade, so these are students between 4th and 8th grade. And we want them also to increase their assessment scores to meet the targets by 28%, which is where they started, to 60%. So this is where we are relative to that. It's also 28% of the students who were in the not met category. They have progressed to meet or exceed. This is in 2024, 2025, so last year. Okay. And then board goal 3 is around math, and it is specific to 9th grade. Miruna talked a little bit about algebra, and so this is specific to algebra. And it's important to know this information and the expectations for students. We've talked a lot about algebra and the courses that students need in order to be eligible to meet A through G requirements. Also, what they need to get a certificate of completion or a regular diploma or the alt diploma. And so the goal specifically is in pursuit of having more than 80% of Black African American students meet the algebra A through G requirements by the end of grade 9. The proficiency gap between Black and African American students and all other students will decline from 5% in June 2023 to 0 by June 2028. So this goal is about math, but it also focuses on African American students. And part of the reason for that is when we showed all the data to the board, one of the things that is in our data was that there was a larger gap of meeting the A through G requirements for African American students. So their charge for us was to reduce that gap. So the status of students with IEPs is that 45% of Black or African American students with an IEP met the A through G algebra requirements by the end of 9th grade in the 2024-2025 school year. And A through G requirements are, who remembers, why do we need A through G? Why would a student want to be A through G eligible? Does anybody remember from our last presentation? University. They can go to a 4-year university. So this is for them to go to, right out of high school, they can go to Cal State Long Beach, they could go to UC, and that's what the A through G allows them to do. Now, if they don't have A through G, they can still graduate with a high school diploma. And they could go to other post-secondary colleges. They can go to community college and get their associate's degree there and then transfer. Or they can have, they can get their certificate of completion. So we talked about all those options. This goal is specifically about being eligible for the A through G by passing the math requirement, which is algebra. Now, keep in mind that some of our students that have IEPs take a different type of algebra so that it is more digestible. So we have some courses that are algebra AB, and then they would take that in 9th grade. And then they take algebra CD, and they would take that in 10th grade. So if they're taking those courses, they would not meet this this A through G by the end of 9th grade because they have to finish A, B, and C and D in order to meet that. But that doesn't mean that they won't be A through G eligible. It just won't be that they're on track by the end of 9th grade. Is this board? Oh, I'm going the wrong way again. All right, and board goal 4 is also related through A to G. And so this one says, in pursuit of having more than 66% of Black African American graduating seniors, A through G eligible, the proficiency gap between African American students and all other students will decline from 13% in June 2023 to 0 by June 2028. So again, we're talking about reducing the gap between African American students and all other students. And where we were by the end of last year is that 24% of African American students with an IEP graduated A through G eligible in the 2024-2025 school year. Oops. All right, now I'm doing the next one too. Okay, we'll take a quick pause. This is not the microphone. It's a show, so
It's we're just gonna switch it up just a little bit because this is actually my dream presentation, this data dump, and so I want us all to take a moment to really digest it. So because we had a screaming match about this in our planning meeting about whether we should be talking about it or whether we shouldn't. And it's because, and Dr. Sosa Valderrama understands the board goals very well, and they are very confusing. But we had some moments of real understanding that we want to share. So why don't you start?
So one of the things that we were debating is this data meaningful for our community, right? Because a lot of the metrics that we're talking about can be seen as ableistic when we're measuring our students against these data points. And so going back to the Ed Roberts quote that I was saying at the beginning, is this data meaningful in terms of promoting advocacy for our students, or is this data potentially harmful, especially when we look at metrics like FIRSA performance, right? And because here's the thing about, and this, I will die on this hill, I say it all the time, literacy and reading level is not a measure of intelligence. It is not a measure of competency. It is none of those things. Reading is a skill, and you acquire that skill through all different types of means. Some people may need to acquire that skill at a different rate with different tools. It is a skill. And so to say that for our students with IEPs, if they are not meeting the FIRSA requirement by the end of third grade, there's some sort of deficit, I think that can be really, really harmful. And sometimes some of our students may not be able to even access the FIRSA assessment because it's not designed with them in mind. And I think that that's a really, really important thing to think about when we think about our kids with IEPs, is that these assessments that measure typical achievement are not designed to include our students. And so that is a important data point. I don't want to put David on blast, but I'm going to because he's shaking his head. We had a conversation about this in terms of meaningful data. So I don't know if you want to just like say a couple words about it, but.
I think our discussion was reflecting on the board goal 3 that Dr. Sosa was describing. And I think the whole goal of tonight was to remind us that we're an advocacy group, right? So if we're going to be advocating for things, we want to know what we're advocating for. And I think these board goals really help us to kind of see where we could continue to advocate within Long Beach Unified. So when you looked at board goal 3, it talked about students completing that algebra requirement by 9th grade. But if these board goals were created with our students in mind, and if we were out there saying, hey, wait a second, we have a large population that's going to finish that algebra requirement by 10th grade, let's include them in this goal, then that would be a more meaningful reflection for the students that we largely serve. So that was one area where it was just like, wow, I, as an educator in Long Beach Unified for 20-some years, have never really reflected on the board goals because as a teacher, maybe I didn't see my students there, or it wasn't where I was highlighting the data points. And then to have that moment where we sat as a group and we're like, wow, we could do more to include, all students in those board goals. That was a big aha for us as a team. And so we wanted to just kind of highlight that piece. Hopefully that's what you wanted me to talk about. Okay.
Yeah, and there was some, we can't do questions, Mr. Pooh. We're going to go to questions at the end, I promise. I think what David is saying is, for the longest time, I watch all the school board meetings, and I have watched the board presentation many times, and they always upset me, and it didn't make sense to me of why it upset me until I did do a closer reading of Board Goal 3 in particular. And the reason it stands out so much is because of those reasons that David said, because a lot of us in this room know that a lot of our students don't take algebra in 9th grade. So we know that, and we know that our kids count. So when they give this presentation over and over again, and they leave out our kids as examples of success or whatever the board goals are measuring, it matters, and we feel it. So obviously we do not have any power over board goals, and so we really do hope that this is a moment of shared understanding. Oh, he remembered more. Okay, and then we got 2 minutes, or Susie's gonna bring her.
It was super quick. It was around, we hear from teachers a lot. So I used to work at OCIPD, and we would coach teachers, and they would come up to us and ask us literally, why are we just centering Black and African American students, right? And sometimes we would think, yeah, why aren't we centering our students with IEPs? But the real takeaway is when we center our most marginalized students, then all students are benefiting. So by centering our Black and African American students and seeking to uplift their voice and really think through a lens of what instructional practices are going to benefit my Black and African American students, all marginalized students are benefiting. So that's really how we can advocate further too with our, any parents or teachers that are wondering those things. So that was the other piece of the discussion. Yes, I did not want to leave that piece out. All right.
That's great. That's what I wanted to say.
And just to expand a little bit on David's point, to give specifics as to, because sometimes teachers will say, well, why? Tell me why. That sounds good, but why, right? When we center our Black and African American students, and particularly when we center our Black and African American students with IEPs, we are doing two really powerful things. We are challenging racist practices, and we are challenging ableist practices together. So that's why that's really important, because it is about looking at our inherent values and our systems and saying these things that we have built are not in service of our students. And when we do that, we open up our community for everyone, right? So that's the really important takeaway, is that when we center our kids with IEPs, and particularly when we center our kids with intersectional identities, like our Black students with IEPs, like our gender diverse students with IEPs, when we center and we name them, we also name the systems that oppress them, that harm all of us, right? Because racist practices, ableist practices impact our entire community. And where we sit closest to the point of privilege, we may not feel the impact to the same degree, but it creates a toxic atmosphere for all of us. So that is why that conversation is really important. And I'm more than happy to talk about that at length later with anyone who wants to talk about it.
Back to Dr. Sosa. Thank you for that break.
All right. Thank you all for elaborating on that. And so as we are talking about those practices that we really have to dismantle, when we were planning for the state of education, we asked Robin, well, what kind of data are you looking for? And she said, I want all of the real data. I want what's really happening in our district for our students. So we're gonna give you the real data. And it is important that you have it. And I know I'm gonna chop this up, but there's a quote by James Baldwin that says something along the lines of, if you don't face something, if you don't know what you're dealing with, then you can't address it. So we have to know what we're working with in order to know how to address concerns that we have. And so the data that I'm about to share is around disproportionality. Does anybody know what that means, disproportionality? So disproportionality is part of the data story that Ken and Miruna work. And what they do is they look at sharing this data with the state of California, and they look at, are there any eligibility categories? So the eligibility categories for disabilities, are there any subgroups that are overrepresented in relation to the other groups and the total population in their school district? So, yes, there are some areas that we have some disproportionate representation. So specifically, in the category, eligibility category of emotional disability, we have African American students are over-identified in that category, which means that African American students are 3.65 more likely to be in one of our, or to be identified as having an emotional disability. Now that is significant because it speaks to what Miruna was talking about, right? There's systems of oppression at work. There are practices that are perpetuating these practices that we need to dismantle those. And so we did do, we looked at the data, we tried to figure out where are these students, what schools are they attending, who's assessing them, are they overly disciplined, where is this happening? So this is like a hotspot data. And we do see that a lot of the students that are currently identified as having an emotional disability are on the north side of Long Beach, and then on the west and central side. And again, we're looking at data, we're using the data, and what we have to do when something like this happens is we have to address it. And so what are some of the things that we're doing to address it? I mean, we're currently engaged in like looking at a lot of data where we have to write a plan to the state to let them know what we're doing. But we have engaged in several practices to help build the capacity of our schools to do things differently. So we have conducted training with our school psychologists who do the assessments. We have engaged in all of our elementary schools are going through it's called PBIS, and it stands for Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports training through the LA County Office of Education to give schools strategies on how to use positive behavior supports before they use exclusionary discipline or any discipline that is punitive. We're also looking at ways to support schools and principals to help them understand what are ways that we can support students. Because just because a student is not behaving the way an adult wants them to does not mean that they have an emotional disability, right? We talked about at the last meeting, there are different ways that students learn. We have our neurodiverse students who might not be able to sit on the carpet for 15 minutes. And so how are we changing our environments so that there's different ways that they can participate? Maybe they can stand, maybe they can take a brain break. Maybe we have flexible seating that allows them to rock. So working with our schools to help them understand different ways that we can include and make our spaces appropriate for kids, and how to redirect students in a way that is not punitive. So those are a couple of the things that we're doing. Okay, and then we're also gonna share with you some information about discipline. So again, African American students, these are suspensions that are happening that are less than 10 days. So an African American student is 3.81 times more likely to be suspended in our schools. And as you know, when a student doesn't feel that they are in school, that they are wanted in school, there might be some attendance. So we do also have a higher rate of students with IEPs that have chronic absenteeism. And so Ms. Rodarte will talk to us a little bit about what that looks like. But there is a relationship, right? If I don't feel like I want to be in school, sometimes parents keep their kids at home, or maybe they're sent home from the school. So all of those things also affect chronic absenteeism. Jen? Yeah. Are these yours? Yeah, okay. So Ms. Jennifer Rodarte, who is our Director of Student Support Services and oversees both discipline and also attendance, is going to share a little bit about the data around these areas.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jennifer Rodarte. I am the Director of Student Support Services. I've been with Long Beach Unified School District for the past 28 years, and I am very, very happy to say I've been in Student Support Services for the last 2 years, digging deep into data. And so it's a pleasure for me to be here today to talk about the data. But also, I want to thank you all for the work that you do as advocates for our district and for our students with special needs. My student was a student with special needs in Long Beach Unified School District. I couldn't get to a lot of these meetings because I work, and I work late, and I was working double jobs sometimes, and so I appreciate the work that you guys do on behalf of all of our students, including my own over the years. So to briefly talk about attendance, I have 5 minutes, but I'm going to try to give you guys what I can give you in 5 minutes. Our department, Student Support Services, we set goals using 2 forms of data: qualitative data, talking to advocacy groups like you, surveys, and talking to our students. And we also use quantitative data. And so this is an example of the quantitative data that we've been digging into. It's the California State Dashboard. Our goal with the California State Dashboard is to never land in the red. And so you can see in my department in particular, we're responsible for supporting interventions for chronic absenteeism, suspension rate, and graduation rate. And right now, our chronic absenteeism rate is at 24.5% district-wide. That means 1 in every 4 students is missing more than 10% of the school day. Chronic absenteeism means that they are missing 18 days of school or more. So we know this isn't just a one subgroup type of problem. This is a district problem right now. It's a culture that we have to shift. Digging deeper into our data, we do have subgroups that are in the red for chronic absenteeism. So if you look at that top row, currently we have 5 subgroups that are in the red. That is a red flag for us. We got to do something about it. have a poster. We posterized it. It's on our district webpage, and we show the sense of belonging. The other thing is knowledge, also posted on our district webpage now, on every school site webpage is an attendance tracker. So just bringing that knowledge to the families. Okay, let me go to the next one. And then there's tier 2. And those are the students that we talk about that are marginalized. And for the tier 2 interventions, we started going out to sites and helping them build teams, create START teams, school attendance review teams. And those teams sit around the table, and there's people at the team that represent nursing services, mental health services. We also have teachers and counselors who support our students with disabilities. And they try to figure out ways to get the kids in school, to re-engage them. If health is an issue, how can we re-engage you? If mobility is an issue, how can we support you? Their focus at the site is to help with that. And our focus in student support services is to guide them and consult with the leaders and the educators at the site. So if you know anybody that has been going through any type of chronic absenteeism, all they gotta do is call the site and ask for START support. S-A-R-T, START support. And if the site has any concerns or thoughts about that where they need additional help, they know to call us. And then finally, I think my 5 minutes is up, but finally for the tier 3, going into the 26-27 school year, we will be doing case managing of all of the subgroups. So we'll be digging a little bit deeper and supporting the tier 3 kids, and those are the students who have 50 or more absences. And how do we support them? We advocate for them. We make sure that we are building the bridges to the supports that are already implemented or supplemented in our district. And that's it. I think I did it under 5.
Thank you. Okay, and now I'm going to invite Dr. Prelo up, and she is going to talk a little bit about our programs and how data informs our program selection.
Good evening, everybody. All right, so I have the pleasure of talking to you about our programming. So how does data inform the programs that we offer in our district, and how do we design it? So we don't just use data for compliance. We want to ensure that our programs are proactive, that they're equitable, and that they actually meet the needs of our students. So in order for us to do that, we have to actually look at data. So what does that actually look like? So it helps us when it comes to program planning and design. So we ensure, when we do our program planning, to ensure that students have access to services as close to where they live. That's the least restrictive environment. You want to have a program that's near where you live, and also still honor if you want to do school of choice. So when we look at that, when it comes to program planning and design, also monitoring student outcomes, we need to make sure it's actually effective. So you can have all the programs you want, but if they're not effective, then what's the point of designing it that way? So that means we're looking at the students' IEP goals, their progress with that, how they do in assessments, how they do with attendance, their behavior, and also the graduation rate. So we look at different metrics to be able to see how effective is our student outcomes when it comes to our programs. Staffing and support. So we also use our data just to make sure that our staffing aligns with our student needs. Where is appropriate staffing? What do they need? What related service providers are needed at that school site? So we're looking at data to have that drive how we staff our programs. Another thing that we do is we work with OCIPD to make sure that our teachers are trained. So we provide the programming, and we work hand in hand with them to develop our teachers, to provide professional development for them, for our programs. Then compliance and continuous improvement. So when we staff, our staffing must align with the students' needs and compliance. So also we use it, when we look at compliance and I look at our data, do we need to refine these programs? Is it working? If it's not working, how are we going to change it? So we know it's not working. It's a measure of compliance when we look at data, but how do we improve it? How do we make it better for the students that we serve? That's it. So where are our programs located? So in the slide deck, are we able to click it? So we have the schools maps where our schools are located. So you also have access to see where all our programs are for our elementary schools, where they are available. So that's the elementary. You'll have access to see where they are for the middle schools and K-8s, where the programs are. We also have a list of where the programs are for our high schools and what service them. The biggest part of what we want to do is to make sure that we have programs available in the areas in which you live. So to minimize the travel time for the students, how they get to school, so we want them to be available. And then the student need and location. So when you looked at the part of the presentation from Dr. Sosa Valderrama, when it comes to our students who have an emotional disability, the location that we're saying mostly on the north side, and then we come down on the west side, we have 2 locations for students who meet these needs in the north area. So it's closer to where the area in which the students live. Also, the capacity. So it would be amazing if we could have a program at every single school, but we know that's not possible. But we would like to have it in a regional area where it'll still be closest to families that have access to it. So we have to definitely look at site spacing. So we can't go in blind and say it doesn't matter if they have space in the school. Also the staffing, and the real important piece about how close it is into the home to help inform our decisions when it comes to that. So that's just a quick overview about where we have the placement. So you're able to see where all our programs are located in the different areas. You got a general map for Long Beach, but it's just very important that we want to make sure that all our families, that the students have access to a program, their program, and hopefully as close to their home as possible. And so then that way they'll have an opportunity to attend school with their friends that's in their neighborhood, to be able to have that access. And then when we don't, we try to get you, if it's not available at your actual home school, to try to place your student at a school that's the next closest school to that area. So that was just a quick overview of the programs that we have, but just knowing that we use the data to inform how we do our programs, and if something is not working, we are actively working with our partners in OCIPD to change it, to make it better for all students. So that's what we do when it comes to programming.
Thank you. A quick word about data too that I wanted to add. So the state data that I went over, the indicator data, that also informs our program work. So how does that inform our program work? So if we know that, for instance, one of the indicators that I said about separate school setting, so we know we're supposed to be at 2% for students in separate school settings, but right now we're at 3.46%. So that means that we have more students going to NPS than the target that we would want for the state. So that could potentially, when we're looking at data, give us an indication that perhaps we need to offer different services in our continuum that meet the needs of students who may require more intensive services. So what I am not saying that I think that we need to open up a district NPS, but what I am saying is that we should be having those difficult conversations when we look at our continuum of services to say, what do we need to implement that can service these students, that can lower our referrals to non-public schools. And this is also my plug for the big 3-year review of our local plan, which is next year. And this is really exciting because that is the time where we look at our continuum of services, we look at all of our data, and we say, like, what do we need to create? What do we need to refine that can better meet the needs of our students? And our CAC is actually an intricate part of that because the Ed Code requires them to advise me on the local plan. And so please, 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 we sent out a CAC survey that we are going to keep open through the start of the school year. If you want your CAC to address certain data points, certain programs, if you'd like topics for family advocacy, let us know because that's going to influence our calendar for next year, but also it's going to influence the CAC board's discussion in advising the SELPA and the local plan. All right.
Okay, we're going to do questions. Judy's going to read them because I do not do a good job at this. Does anybody have questions? We're going to do, can you do did you write it on an index card? Or you want to do it? Well, let's do the ones written down first, and then we'll go to you. Yeah, do you want to write it down? But we're going to do these questions first, and then we'll get to you. Hold up, but you can't hear. Yeah. Okay, so and we have to do it on the microphone. Oh. Okay, and then you guys have to answer it because.
Do you need to,
They'll come. Yeah, come to her.
okay. For Dr. P and programs, how do you measure program effectiveness?
By actually looking at how the students are doing this in that program. So looking at the classroom, we have the observations coming in the classroom, if it's working, if the students are being successful. Like we said, we're looking at the IEP goals, or they're meeting their goals. If they're looking at, if it's, let's say upper level high school, what is the graduation rate? So how they're actually doing in the class. So if we're looking at the programs, like what do we offer? Does it need to be tweaked? Do they need more support here or less support there? So we're just looking at the whole program as to see what's working or not working.
Yeah, sure. Doesn't the map Dr. Sosa shared show or prove the over-identification of African American students?
Yes, the map is a picture reflection of the disproportionality that we were discussing, and it also shows the areas that we need to work in addressing bias and representation for our students. Yes.
And why would we want to put those programs there?
So with having the programs, it's closer to where the students live. So then it would be less time that a student, if they were using the transportation, with less time to be on the bus, easier access to the students that are in their neighborhoods.
Is it an over-identification though? Is it a problem? That was my question.
Say that one more time.
Isn't it? I'm going to say it on the mic.
Okay.
Isn't the problem that there is the over-identification of students, of African American students in the north and west side, in the best part of town? So why would we put those programs there? Because shouldn't we put them because that's the problem, that they're there. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. So yes, that is the problem. Over-identification is the problem. But once students are over-identified, they receive an IEP. That IEP has the ED eligibility, and we have a legal responsibility to offer programs that service those students. So we place the programs there because they're closer to the student's home. Now, what we want to do is not have the over-identification to begin with. So what that means is that when we're engaging in psycho-ed evaluations for eligibility, we're ensuring that those assessments are not biased. We're ensuring that those assessments are not rooted in cultural norms that are based in white supremacy and how we evaluate our students' behavior. We're doing all those things to ensure that those psycho-ed assessments that students are being evaluated on does not disproportionately lend itself to an ED diagnosis. So that's the work that we need to do to ensure that we're not offering IEPs that have an ED eligibility. But once we do offer that IEP and parents sign, the student has the legal right to have services closest to their homes. So that is why the programs are there.
So it's in response to them being identified. Mm-hmm. So they wasn't, the programs were not placed in that area prior to the students being identified. So it wasn't like we know the over-identification is coming in certain areas, so we didn't go in beforehand with them being identified and say, hey, we're going to put a program here on the north side. That wasn't a response to the students.
Can an IEP be initiated while in a homeschool environment?
Yes, and if you have a homeschool student and you are wanting assessment or suspecting that they may need an IEP, that's part of that child file responsibility that Dr. Owens and myself and Susie and everyone in our department has. So please let us know and we will connect you with the right resources for assessment and access to IEP consideration.
What is the A through G algebra requirement?
Ninth grade, but
It means they're completing algebra in the ninth grade. with a grade of A, B, or C? Thank you, Ms.
So yes, ninth grade, right? So A through G must be algebra, geometry, and algebra 2. So the reason why that's so important that if you have an 8th grader who is having needs with math, that you understand at comprehensive high schools, not thematic high schools, comprehensive high schools have algebra AB for 9th grade, algebra CD for 10th grade, geometry for junior year, and algebra 2 for senior year. So it is possible to still have A through G, as Dr. Sosa Valderrama said, with algebra A, B, C, D. That is our only course that is A through G qualifications. Hopefully that clarifies a little bit more.
Is the ultimate goal with SA to be 100% of our students in GE 80%, and so to 100% of our students in GE 40%?
Whoever wrote this question, you don't need to identify yourself, but this is literally how my brain works when Ken is talking to me about the data, the CalPAS data. Yeah, the goal for the state is that we are offering our students access to the general ed environment 80%, at least at a rate of 80%. And that we are ensuring that our students that have access to the gen ed environment at a rate of 40% or lower is at, I think the state target is 13%. But where this gets tricky is that a student's least restrictive environment is individualized, right? So the LRE is really based on the services and the program that best meets the student's needs. And so what the indicator measures is that based on the IEPs that we send up to the state, we are offering our students LRE at a rate of 80% or ideally higher based on their needs, so that we are meeting the students' LRE rate with gen ed students.
What interventions have been implemented in the past or currently to support students with anxiety, since they do not know how to advocate for their needs?
So there are lots of interventions. We can, I guess, tag team this question, but what I'm thinking about from the IEP perspective, if anxiety is interfering with educational access, you are entitled to educated related mental health services. That is ERMS, and so that's one of the qualifiers for ERMS services, which is a counseling service that your student is entitled to support them with things like anxiety that may be impacting their school access and attendance. But there are other interventions too.
So we've been working a lot with exposure therapy and just trying to get them at least on the campus and trying to figure out places where they feel safe and making sure that we are just kind of starting slowly at their needs. Also going to the homes and making sure that there's a trusted adult that has a bridge or a connector to the student before we try to re-engage them.
That completes the Q&A. Anybody? Oh, yes. Does anybody want to ask a question? Oh, yes. Sorry. Oh, she needs a translator? Oh, okay.
Yes. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm Monica. I have my daughter. She study at Signal High School. Yeah, okay. ខ្ញុំនិយាយមកថ្ងៃនេះគឺខ្ញុំចង់និយាយថាខ្ញុំសប្បាយចិត្តហើយខ្ញុំមកថ្ងៃនេះគឺខ្ញុំចង់និយាយជាមួយជារួមជាមួយនឹងអាណាព្យាបាលនិងសាលាពីព្រោះចំណុចសំខាន់ដែលក្មេងមានបញ្ហាភាគច្រើនគឺចោទទៅលើសាលាក៏ប៉ុន្តែភ្លេចមើលមកខ្លួនឯងថាតើការចូលរួមរបស់យើងជាមួយនឹងសាលាហ្នឹងវាសមគ្នាដែរទេយើងមិនមែនមកនឹងគ្រាន់តែចូលរួមទេយើងត្រូវតែចូលរួមទាំងការចូលរួមសប្តាហ៍ថ្ងៃទាំងការចូលរួមអប់រំរបស់កូនយើងនិងការដែលយើងត្រូវតែការពារទាំងសាលាការពារទាំងយើងសំខាន់បំផុតគឺអាណាព្យាបាលទាំងអស់ដែលបានចូលរួមនៅកន្លែងនេះយើងចូលរួមទាំងការចូលរួមទាំងការអប់រំសិស្ស
Sorry, I had to condense all those what she said, okay? She would like all the parents here to participate in educating our students at home also, not just only the school and the teachers that are doing all the job educating the students. We, the parents, have to help out educating, for example, bullying, racial discriminations, what's happening at home, and parents has to look out for all those signs, so that way to prevent it from happening at school.
ខ្ញុំចង់ឲ្យអាណាព្យាបាលទាំងអស់យើងព្យាយាមយកចិត្តទុកដាក់ថាបើសិនណាជានៅសាលាមានការខ្វះខាតឬក៏ខ្វះខ្សោយអ្វីមួយក៏ទាំងអស់នឹងមិនត្រឹមតែតាក់ទងនៅសាលាក៏តាក់ទងជាមួយយើងអញ្ចឹងយើងត្រូវតែមានការចូលរួមទាំងអស់គ្នា
Whatever that school do not adequately provide to our students, we as parents have to look for that and support them at home and provide them discipline and with all kind of education also.
ពីព្រោះថាតាក់ទងផ្ទាល់ជាមួយនឹងកូនខ្ញុំក៏រៀននៅសាលា Signal here ខ្ញុំមិនបានចោលសាលាទេសាលាមានការអប់រំខ្ពស់ជាមួយកូនខ្ញុំប៉ុន្តែខ្វះខាតយើងមិនអាចថាសាលាខ្វះខាតទាំងស្រុងបានទេយើងក៏មានការខ្វះខាតអញ្ចឹងថ្ងៃនេះខ្ញុំសនំពរឲ្យអាណាព្យាបាលទាំងអស់មិនត្រឹមតែចូលរួមក្នុងការចូលរួមទាំងអស់គ្នាយើងចូលរួមជាមួយគ្នាក្នុងការអប់រំក្មេងជាពិសេសគឺកូនរបស់យើងទាំងអស់គ្នា
For example, my children are attending Signal Hill School, and whatever that school is providing to my children, if they lack of something, and I myself as parents, I have to provide what's needed for my children to develop at school. So my suggestion is that we as parents have to work together with the school to support our children at home and at school.
ហើយចុងក្រោយខ្ញុំគ្រាន់តែសំណូមពរថាឲ្យខាងសាលាយកចិត្តទុកដាក់ជាមួយនឹងការរបបចំណីអាហារក្មេងនិងសុខុមាលភាពរបស់ក្មេងនេះជាសំណូមពររបស់ខ្ញុំចំពោះតែសាលារៀនហើយនឹងយកចិត្តទុកដាក់ជាមួយនឹងពង្រឹងប្រតិបត្តិជាមួយនឹងក្មេងណាដែលគាត់ខ្សោយនៅចំណុចការសិក្សា
My recommendation for the school district is to provide enough foods and enough educations and to make sure their well-being at school and their health at school are taken care of, and I myself as parents I will take care of my part.
ហើយខ្ញុំដឹងថា Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to open it up for public comment. Just a general disclaimer, remember to keep confidential information about your student, yourself, private, so that this is a public environment, so that we can ensure your safety. And also just remember we all are on YouTube, so again, just make sure if you're sharing a public comment that you share in a way that keeps your private information confidential, so that it does not go to the general public and unforeseen spaces that we do not know. All right, and now public comment is open.
Thank you again, Dr. Marina, and congratulations to Dr. Chilbaker for the nominee ally for special need children. And also thanks to all the staff and also the parents and my colleague. She said a lot about the parents. My general comment here is based, today I think that's too much information for us to absorb, even, we are not well educated like all of you hear about all the data, and the reality here, for example, Dr. Marina was mentioned about the goals, the thing, I have a lot of questions, but sometimes I feel intimidated to even ask because I don't know the background. For example, who creates those kind of goals? Is that set up by somebody from AI, somebody high above, or somebody else? And how you measure that goal, and why we don't achieve it? This should be presented to us as parents, so parents can learn about it and improve it and work on it. So that's one the public comment. I noticed that the last 3 months we receive as parents a lot of information from the school about belong. I know that. And this word is a big word, that. And it takes a lot of time to inspire all those kids to welcome at school. And one person cannot do the job. A sense of belonging start by the principal. Even the person who does the cleaning, had to say hello to the kid. It's a whole school system. As when you walk in, are you greeted properly? Are you asked all these questions? Maybe that's a very, very big task. And you know as well as I do, whatever we said is ideal, but reality on the street is totally different. Black community are so intimidated by the policy of the government, Mexican, Cambodian, ICE coming. Why we don't reflect on that as well? Because this is, we promote inclusion, outside they promote exclusion. So if I would be a kid, I start asking questions here, what happening, okay? The last topic I was mentioned is based on my experience after my son being 8 years at school now. I know AI is well progressing and everybody was talking it. This morning, Facebook, Zuckerberg, Meta, lay out about a couple thousand people AI replaced. So it's coming. My son learned about AI since first grade. We call I ready, right? As soon as you're walking, I ready, I ready, I ready, I ready, I ready. But you know what? My colleague here was mentioning about learning algebra. My son now is in class with, I have to mention the name because I really respect her, Dr. Okimoto from Hoover. She don't believe in that. She just said, hey, in my class, we use pen and paper to do math. No, after 7 years of falling behind, he be able to catch up to know math instead of using I-ready math. So please, all parents and all educators, we have a lot of brain here. We need to really have a balance here. We cannot count on AI make our job easier for grading, for everything, including lesson plan, and yet the kids are much more behind. And study need to be done about I-ready, is that helping the kid spend, you say less screen time, but at home more screen time. So please, this data need to be, since we talk a lot about data, we should talk a lot also about what I call normative issue, some things that happen without data, So those kind of things that happen in real life to parents. Maybe this kind of thing we can work to tie it in a little bit, so this way we can have a well-balanced view from the school or from the parent. Other than that, I thank Robin for always so supportive and the whole school district for conducting this wonderful meeting once a month. Bye-bye.
Sorry. I'm sorry if Jenna worded it correctly. And I think it was in regards to the attendance to the SART, right? We actually were discussing this yesterday, me and my girlfriend, about just attendance with school, I think I've always been a big believer that your best ability is your availability, and you're always going to be held accountable, right? My question is, like, how do we navigate that with students when we're telling them, like, hey, you know what, we understand that you feel like you don't belong or you have an emotional disability, like, for them to understand that it's not, I guess, always going to be, excuse is a bad word, but we can't necessarily, when they get into, like, the real world, that it can't be used to get out of everything, right? It's like, how do we navigate that with the students?
So there's a lot of questions or a lot of thoughts in that question. And so basically navigating this concept, and I said this earlier, any cultural shift is going to have to, and you said it beautifully, takes everybody. It takes the school, takes everybody on the school campus, and the parents. And so when we're talking about shifting the culture, we're talking about 1 out of every 4 students. There's a cultural shift that needs to happen. How do we navigate it? Because if we don't do it now, exactly what you said, as adults, the kids are going to be in trouble. They're going to think that they can have those excuses, and then what happens with work, right? And so I'm not generalizing one specific population. I'm saying all students in Long Beach. We've got to make that shift. And I want to take splices of what you said and share that with folks because it sounds so simple. Greet, say hello, go out there, shake their hands, know their names. It starts there. That alone, it makes anxiety go away. I know when I walked in this room, people I've never seen before, I got a little anxiety. And the first person that greeted me and said, hello, Jennifer, oh, I'm glad you're here. So how do we address that? Is that we have to get out and pave the roads and the paths and start speaking up at the school sites of like, hey, are we doing this? Are the parents there? We have plenty of VIPs out there that can be a part of this cultural shift. And so it's about coming together as a team. The anxiety is real. And I think that technology has lent itself to a lot of anxiety in students because they're isolating themselves at home. They're not outside. You know, many of us grew up playing outside and being at the parks, and now our students are on technology and they're locked in. And so when it's time to talk and be adults, and not adults, but be, part of society, they're stumbling. And so another push that you've seen in Long Beach is really trying to lessen the amount of technology time, starting off with phones. No more phones allowed on campus, and we'll continue to go down that road. But I hope I'm answering the question, but when I think specifically, if it's like a one student type of situation, every student has a different story and has a different journey, and they really have to connect with the mental health support that's out on the campus, whether that is a wellness center, a counselor, a psychologist. The families, when it comes to anxiety and mental health, they have to connect with the professionals that are on the campus.
And then I just wanted to add really quick, because I think there is a really important question within that question. So what do you do when you have these accommodations for students and you have these supports? What happen? How do you transition kids to the real world, which is not going to be school, right? And that's such an important question, because a lot of times our students get services at their school, and then the IEP ends and they're adults, and like, what do you do, right? And so that's why it's really, really important to have those conversations around the individual transition plan in the IEP, and look at how services are not only currently benefiting the student, but how they're preparing them for the outside world when those services will no longer be there. And I think one of the really powerful things around certain services that we offer, like the inclusion work that we do, is that it teaches kids resilience, and it teaches them to identify living within systems that maybe could be oppressive, that won't recognize their disability, right? That will tell them, well, that's just an excuse. Like, you have anxiety, you're tripping, you still have to show up to work, right? So how do I build my resiliency skill set so that I can show up, do my job, but also take care of myself and affirm myself and be there for myself and my family? So I love that question. It's part of like such a bigger conversation.
I just wanted to like comment on what you said. When you're saying it sounds like an excuse, I feel like that's very harmful, because like she said, everyone does have their own issue, and I feel like it's really like what you said. You really have to come from a advocacy kind of perspective, where you have to really understand that it's not an excuse. it's not something that they intended or even want. You know what I'm saying? But unfortunately, not unfortunately, but it is what it is. I don't know how to explain it better, but it just felt. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was just, yeah.
No, what I'm saying is I think the word excuse was a bad choice of words, and I think what she's saying is it's a reality that the individual is living with. Like you said, like everyone has a different circumstance, and I think it's just the perception of the outside world because they might not know what this person is or the individual is dealing with anxiety or depression, whatever it may be. So the outside world sees it as, hey, well, you're just giving me a reason that you're not coming to work that might not seem valid to them, but to yourself, it's like, hey, I'm really going through something, and it's, you know, it's a valid reason, you know. But I think just realistically, I think we're all working, and sometimes it's seen as like, hey, this isn't something that's legitimate, you know. But I think we all just have to investigate more, kind of dig deeper and try to understand why, to be more compassionate as well.
One thought that comes to my mind, because I have the same concern you have, is to think about the fact that when they're getting these accommodations to help access their education, along with that, and those accommodations is helping them to build skills, and not just the skills that your mainstream people get, but the skills they need to manage their disability so they can get into the real world and manage their disability in the real world. So that's one thing that brings me comfort, is to just think about how to use those goals and everything to, sort to, like, one of the things we do with RIP is we're talking about reducing the services. So how can we, so that's part of one of the things I feel like using your IEP in this process, and when they're this age, is to think like that way. So that helps a little bit with how they're gonna handle the real world. So I don't know if that helps.
I think also, sorry, really quick. I think also just saying the real world is kind of like, that's another thing that we also need to pay attention to. Maybe we should change the culture in the real world so that we do have a more, we can come more from like an advocacy point. And again, that's kind of like where our voting goes to, so that we can change, the culture of the real world, so that we don't continue to feel like, I don't know, like it's and I know you're saying it was about, not the best example, but unfortunately that is the truth. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Hi. As I've sat here and listened, I really debated if I wanted to comment. And I think what has really stood out to me, and is something that I've struggled with as a parent in the district over the last couple of months, listening to next year's budget development and participation in the LCAP, and seeing the staffing levels at our school sites, and hearing that kids don't feel included, and yet the school sites are where they can start to feel included. But yet we're losing a significant portion of our school site staff next year, especially those of us that are at non-Title I schools that also have special education classes. We no longer have any mental health support services on campus. We have our counselor down to part-time. We no longer have access to a wellness den, but yet we're getting an additional special ed class with no additional administrative supports or no other supplemental supports or services. And I think I'm hearing that there's supports available, but none of our children, those with IEPs or other, have any way to access those at a school site that doesn't have them on campus. And I'm really concerned for the children that are utilizing those services this year across the board, where and how they're gonna get those supports. And if they already don't feel included, how will they continue to be included next year when there's nobody there to actually provide that support? And my anxiety is talking in front of people that I know. The other comment that I had, I guess, question was, as we're talking about attendance and attendance recovery measures,
I'm fortunate that my children go to a school that we have a really good attendance rate, but listening to what the attendance rate or the absentee rate is for students with disabilities or those that have IEPs that is significantly high as it is, as a parent in a district with a child that has an IEP, I have not heard anything about any attendance recovery programs that have been or are being implemented. And I think that's really crucial. I think that's an avenue that we can utilize. And so if those programs are available, this is my message to the district that I am not aware and I don't even know where to go to find the information to find them. So that's it. Thank you.
The mental health supports for the non-Title I schools, so that was something that was really important for us to address, and we have been working to find a way to provide support. So we have been fortunate enough, there's this program that California offers, the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Initiative, or CYBHI, that we were using to help to bill so that we can bring in some revenue to our district. But with the closing of those care centers, we're not able to do that, but there's another option, and that is we can get mental health support into our schools from providers that are state-approved CYBHI providers. And so we have secured a contract for services that are free of charge to us, and they will be available to all of our non-Title I schools, so that all of our schools have some type of mental health support. So the the non-Title I elementary schools and K-8s and middle school will have the CYBHI support from that affiliate provider. Our other schools that are having their care and wellness centers reduced will also have access to our school-based mental health support contracts. That was just a point of clarification for that. And it's 8 o'clock.
Sorry, I should meet you. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm waiting for you to walk to me like you're serving me. All right, guys. So it is the end of the year. I have threatened to quit as CAC chair like 17 times, and I'm so glad that I made it here. And I want to thank the board. I want to thank everybody. Have a safe summer. Please be kind to each other and continue to build this community, which means I'm free this summer. So if anybody needs anything, you can let me know. Thank you. We are done. That's a wrap on CAC. Thank you, Myrna.